It's no secret that one of the coolest parts of Borderlands 2 for returning fans was the moment that you complete the mission, the Once and Future Slab. Because when you return to the Crimson Raider HQ to hand in the mission, it's the first time that all the playable characters from Borderlands 1 are all together since the ending of the last game. It didn't matter who you mained, every character got a redesign, a lot more character to them, and so much more of a personal story to tell. But while this moment was awesome, it came at a price. What's going on? I'm Cashew, and this is Borderlands' returning Vault Hunter problem. Having the previous Vault Hunters return at all was just awesome, but what about the characters you're playing right now? In Borderlands 2, all the playable characters were given a lot more characterization in the way of hidden echoes that detail their backstory. And towards the end of Borderlands 2's run, more outright voice acting from your playable character. So this presented a problem. If the undefined Borderlands 1 Vault Hunters got to return, surely the more defined Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters would also. But it's not that simple. While Borderlands 2 started with 4 playable characters thanks to DLC, that number went up to 6. Further complicating things was the release of Borderlands the pre-sequel, which had 6 more playable characters, 2 of which being DLC. These characters being even more detailed because of them being in Borderlands 2 as side characters and the story having built-in playable character interactions from the get-go. Sadly though, 2 of these new Vault Hunters were already killed by the player in Borderlands 2, being Nisha and Wilhelm, so they were never going to return anyway. This left Gearbox with 10 playable characters that they wanted to return for Borderlands 3, and that was just too many to recreate that band is back together moment from Borderlands 2. So they had to compromise. And compromise they did! At Borderlands 3's launch, the returning playable characters turned NPCs were Zero, Maya, Aurelia, and Claptrap. Claptrap was a given since he was the mascot of the franchise, but Aurelia was not a pick anyone was really expecting. Zero and Maya were both beloved characters from their games, not bad picks there, but it was a bit disappointing that they were the only ones who returned. It just didn't make sense to me that the Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters wouldn't stick around with the Crimson Raiders. I do get though that they had to stop themselves as there wasn't enough room in the story for any more characters as it was already spread pretty thin with what they had already. While most were happy to see these characters return, the same can't be said for their implementation. You meet Zero first, who is Reese's right-hand man in the Atlas Corporation after he refound it at the end of Tales from the Borderlands. It makes sense that Zero's helping Reese since they did mate in Tales and fought a Vault monster together, but it makes a lot less sense the more you think about it. Remember when I talked about how all the Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters had their own backstory and echo logs? Well, Zero's is all about how he wants and needs a challenge, with most things boring him. Zero is someone who doesn't want to stay in the same place for too long and is always on to his next challenge. So it seems odd to players that he just works for Reese as his shit kicker.
So you're Donnie's shit kicker? Oh, nah, more like he's a shit kicker. Nah, just steady job. No, I thought your life was shit before we had this talk. Now go do your fucking chores for Donnie.
Oh, nah, they're not chores, they're proper jobs. Oi, Clarence. Oh, Donnie. The carpet in the shop needs vacuuming. Alright, I'll get that done now. He's a pretty nice guy, eh?
Yeah, he's alright, eh?
There is one thing that might explain it though. In Borderlands 3, you can find an echo that heavily suggests that Zero has a crush on Lorelei, another Atlas soldier.
You staring at something, mate?
No, I wasn't. I'm Zero. I'll go tell Reese. It was nice meeting you. Damn it.
Zero might want to stick around maybe just for Lorelei, but it's a pretty thin argument, and that echo is literally the only thing that suggests that in the entire game. The next returning Vault Hunter we find is Maya, who was training their apprentice. Yup, Maya's return in Borderlands 3 is completely tied to the most disliked character in the game, Ava. This definitely made the experience worse for a lot of people, culminating in Maya's death that was directly caused by Ava not listening to her. And for now, that's all she got in the story. There was a planned funeral cutscene that got cut for time, and instead we got a few random characters just standing in a line cracking jokes at her expense. Not the most gracious of ways to bring back a character, that's for sure. In the next area of the game, we get a returnee in the form of Aurelia being the antagonist for this part of the game. This rubbed some people the wrong way, as they thought she turned good at the end of Borderlands the pre-sequel, with her being brought up to Sanctuary seen in a conversation between Athena, Axton, and Gage in the Holodome DLC. This is also where you get a lot of the Gearbox just forgot about the pre-sequel arguments, and yeah, it seems like it. Character arcs were ended, the Watcher was ghosted, Athena's nowhere to be seen, and Aurelia is now even more comically evil than when she worked for Jack. What's even worse about this is that you, the player, have to kill Aurelia to progress. So at the end of the day, it just feels like wasted potential to most of us, especially since Borderlands 3's trailer made it look like she was going to be on our side, just to pull the rug from underneath us when we play the actual game. Besides Claptrap being your tutorial and giving out side quests like he'd done in previous mainline entries, those were the only returning characters. There of course were references to other Vault Hunters like hidden echoes of Krieg talking to Maya, a news report on Gage being on the run, and a porn magazine of Axton. Going commando, huh? The only thing the Borderlands fans fan base had to hope for in the way of the other characters returning was the DLC, and, well, it delivered. The first DLC, The Heist of the Handsome Jackpot, saw the return of Timothy Lawrence, Jack's body double from the pre-sequel. His characterization is honestly really good and by far the best thing about that DLC story. No notes. The next DLC, Guns, Love and Tentacles, saw the grand return of Gage the Necromancer from Borderlands 2. With this being a DLC, she had a lot more time to be in the spotlight, and honestly, she's done really well. Gage was always one of the better characters when it came to being entertaining, so I'm glad to see that that hasn't changed. The only notes I really have is that it's just odd that Gage is a wedding planner, but I mean, you had to get her into the story somehow. It's not egregious in any way, so it works for me. The weird thing about this DLC when talking about returning playable characters is that it's Hammerlock's wedding. I feel like most of the Borderlands 2 Vault Hunters would be there, but instead all we really get is a wanted photo for Salvador, because apparently he has like a really big tab at the lodge they were staying at. It obviously wasn't done because they'd have to redesign and make new models for 4 different characters just for one scene at the end of the DLC, so it makes sense that it isn't included. Just disappointing. I think to Borderlands 3's benefit, not having returning characters for the next DLC was a good call, as it would just be the same thing over and over again. And even though the DLC cycle was far from over at this point, most fans had basically accepted that it was time for Borderlands 3 to create its own identity in their DLC, instead of relying on returning Vault Hunters for all of them. Psych! DLC 4 is all about Krieg! Go inside his mind, fight the train, build the helicopter. The Psycho Krieg DLC is by far my favorite in Borderlands 3, even though it's really short and the side quests are kind of non-existent, it still delivers on what I want from a Krieg DLC. The main thing it gets right is Krieg's characterization. Everything we came to know about Krieg is either mentioned or built upon, with none of it being left on the table. His relationship with Maya and dealing with her death, fighting with his dominant psycho personality, and most importantly, facing his past. It's a shame we don't get to see Krieg in the hub world after the DLC is over, but they really knocked it out of the park with his characterization, which is not something that people say often when it comes to Borderlands 3. You want to get back to the character assassination? Like I said, most people accepted at this point that we probably weren't going to see any more returning characters. Krieg was a bonus. The Gearbox just kept going and released Arms Race, a single-player battle royale game show with some of the best loot in the game. The hosts of Arms Race are previous Vault Hunters, Salvador and Axton. I think this could check out. Seems like something the two of them would randomly find fun, but the game actually goes out of its way to tell you that the reason they're hosting the game show is because they're both struggling financially, and they'll take just about any gig that pays. It's kind of puts that magazine in perspective, doesn't it? But in all seriousness, how? These two were the saviors of Pandora and opened a vault. There is no reason why they would be struggling financially. It's such a weird thing to add in there since it's not a joke and it's never brought up again. It just kind of ruins them being there. Now with these two, tactfully being added to the game, every playable Vault Hunter from Borderlands 2 has returned, along with half the TPS cast to boot. But here stands the problem again. What about the next game? Will the first Vault Hunters even return? Will Zero? Are all the Borderlands 3 characters coming back? Amara is a siren, so that pretty much makes her tied to the plot, whether the fans want it or not. And that's really the issue. At this point, there have been 20 playable Vault Hunters, 5 of which are dead, and almost the rest are wanted to return for the next game, as either a quest giver in the world or just have a part in the main story. I guess my picks for Borderlands 4 would be Zane, Sal, Krieg, Athena, and the BL1 gang at the very least, but it kind of reached a point where you can't really please everyone with this anymore. There are just way too many characters for that now. But let me know who you want to return the most out of the current alive Vault Hunters, and mate, if you want to help the channel grow at all, I'd appreciate a sub or a like, but thank you so much for watching. Let's do the channel member shoutouts. My channel members are JBH, who climbs trees like a snake. I don't really know how they do it. They just kind of slither up it. Whisker520, who fought a boar in a wrestling match that turned out to not be a contestant. They just beat up some random pig that wandered in. Angel B, who sacrificed their soul to the devil in exchange for Borderlands 3 early. I mean, it sounded like a good deal at the time. Chibi Scrimpy, who was the direct inspiration for Mario Jumpman Mario. J Nature was the only person in the world who can explain their dreams to you without it making 0 sense. Noel Roland, who is secretly your long-lost brother that you were separated at birth from. Handsome Frank 63, who just has this energy around him that makes you want to dance. It's either that or the drugs he gave me. And Carlisle McGuinness, who solved the housing crisis. They're said to be selling the info to the highest bidder. Works every time. Thank you guys so much for the extra support. I just thank you so much. If you also want to shout out like these guys, join button is right below the video, but thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.